So today I want to take a look at an ad that I came across in my wanderings across YouTube. It's one of those ads that are actually a video that are placed in front of another video. Like, I believe that they're paid to be put there. And this particular video is an extremely transphobic piece. It is honestly something I don't think should be on YouTube. And so I felt a need to address it and go over it and deal with it. It's a video by an organization called Alliance Defending Freedom, which has to be one of the most astroturfy sounding civil rights organizations I've ever heard of. But it's one of those organizations that deals with like right-wing conservative family values types, and they're trying to, promote a certain set of values, if you catch my meaning. The video is entitled, "Can Schools Keep Parents in the Dark?" And with that said, let's take the journey into this video.
Do the parents of a first grade girl have a right to know if teachers and administrators at her school are encouraging her to believe that she's really a boy trapped in a girl's body?
Hold up. We are 13 seconds into this video. There's been an intro and just a few seconds, and they've already made a wild accusation. There is no evidence to show that any teachers in any schools are telling children to transition. That's the first point. And second point is, if that child is in fact identifying as a boy, they are not a girl. They are not a, girl pretending to be a boy. They are just a boy. So I don't know what they're trying to get at here, but we're not starting off good.
This seems like a simple question with an obvious answer. The answer is yes. Yes, of course, the parents of a minor should at the very least know if their kid's school is influencing them toward making such a life-altering choice.
So again here, it's the school actively acting upon the child, making them make this decision. It's organizations like this that tend to be the ones that say that children shouldn't have agency and shouldn't have control over their own lives, and parents should have like a dominion over their children. And I find it extremely problematic to think that a child can't on some level just explore gender on their own right, or that we should assume that they can't. It just doesn't seem reasonable to me that a child can't explore that component of their lived reality and existence.
Now, who's going to tell the public school district in Madison, Wisconsin? The Madison Metropolitan School District, a taxpayer-funded and government-run public education system, decided in 2018 that students of any age could take on a transgender identity with the school's assistance, and without parents' knowledge or consent.
Why do you think a school system might have a policy put into play? But even if we take all of this as completely factual, in which a trans student might be able to speak about this with their teachers without dealing with parents' consent. Can you think of any reasons? Because I can think of a number right off the top of my head, including abuse at home, the lack of understanding or acceptance of the transness of the child, the desire to put the child down. There's a lot there that could be a reason for that. And if you are a child in that experience, then yes, being able to share this with your teacher in confidence is a good thing.
The district's policy requires that all teachers not only affirm any gender identity a child of any age requests,
Good.
but actively conceal it from parents. Madison's policy even directs teachers to keep parents in the dark by using their child's birth name and pronouns whenever the parents are nearby. Think about that. If 7-year-old Lily decides that she is really Luther, her teachers must call her Luther, except when Lily's parents come in for a parent-teacher conference or school activity.
Let's go over that just a little bit more, because there's a lot wrong with this. Because the actual statement that should be being made here is, if 7-year-old Luther asks his teacher to call him Luther, then the teacher should acknowledge that, and so should the parents. But because the parents, for some reason, are not wanting to accept their child, and the child is afraid of their parents, for some reason or another, probably due to religious affiliation, that 7-year-old child has to pretend to be Lily in front of their parents in order to preserve and protect their existence at home and make sure that they are not abused. And so the teachers assist in that make-believe of 7-year-old Luther pretending to be Lily in order for the child to remain protected and for their life to be maintained and for them to be safe. That's what's going on in this situation. This is not some little girl pretending to be a boy. This is a boy in this particular case, and we should acknowledge this child as a boy because that is what they are experiencing in this moment in time. This is their identity, and we should be affirming that.
Except when Lily's parents come in for a parent-teacher conference or school activity. For many parents, the local public school is their only option. It's also run by the government, which has an obligation to protect parents' rights to direct the upbringing of their children.
What about the child's right? You know, we talk about, the parents' right. What about the child's right to be able to explore their identity? What about the child's experience of the fact that school is the only place that some of these students have outside of their parents' home to explore themselves and to be authentically themselves? So maybe we should be focused on protecting the children rather than protecting the parents' rights to control and manipulate their children.
A right that has been clearly affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court and the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
No, it hasn't. There is no constitutional amendment or Supreme Court backing for that type of parental rights. There has been a proposed conservative parental rights amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which would include the ability, in Section 1, the liberty of parents to direct the upbringing, education, and care of their children as a fundamental right. Section 2, the parental right to direct education includes the right to choose as an alternative to public education, private, religious, or home schools, and the right to make reasonable choices within public schools for one child, which of course, reasonable choices within one's schools probably includes things like, do they have to learn evolution or climate change? Section 3, neither the United States nor any state shall infringe these rights without demonstrating that its governmental interest is applied to the person, is of the highest order and not otherwise served. So, honestly, this one just basically gives parents unlimited power unless you can prove abuse. Which I would argue that denying your trans kid's identity is a form of abuse, but it would be really hard to prove that in court if you're already allowing for this very conservative amendment to exist. The Section 4 would call for the parental rights guaranteed by this article shall not be denied or abridged on account of disability. Fair enough. Section 5, this article shall not be construed to apply to a parental action or decision that would end life. Which brings about an interesting question if you deny your kid access to a vaccine and other such things. I know those are slightly off topic, but this is the kind of proposed amendment that conservatives want. Up to this point, they've been using the 14th Amendment as this tool to kind of put forward a lot of these ideas. And I'm going to be real with you, I don't know what reading of the 14th Amendment is required or what stretch of the 14th Amendment is required in order to justify that people have parental rights under that. And the only other cases I could find about parental rights in the Supreme Court had more to do with visitation rights between divorced parents or grandparents who want to see their kids. So I'm really not sure where they're getting any of this information, and if they're going to make such a claim, they need to back it up themselves.
At a minimum, parents have a moral and legal right to know what is going on with their children. Studies have shown that the vast majority of children who experience gender dysphoria, the feeling that they don't fit their biological sex, ultimately outgrow those feelings by puberty or adulthood.
So there's some truth to what was just said, but I need to address the fact that they use the words biological sex, and I am going to refrain from even accepting the term biological sex as part of this right now. The understanding of gender dysphoria in this case is that your gender is not necessarily in congruence with how you're feeling. That's how I'm going to take that definition and use it. So when a child is experiencing dysphoria at a young age, they are exploring their gender identity. And they may identify as one gender, and very much possible in some sort of fluid understanding of gender that might shift and change and grow as the child gets older and combination of their own development and social beliefs come into play. But I don't think that automatically dismisses us from examining what the child is exploring in that particular moment in time. And I don't think that makes, gender dysphoria this invalid thing that they'd like to admit, because I think that it's quite mutable. Gender can be fluid and change over time as things develop within a person. And so, speaking to that particular statistic, there is some science behind it. You have Gender Dysphoria in Adolescents, Current Perspectives, which ends up going on to suggest that, where is it? 80, yeah, there it is. 80% of children who meet the criteria for GDC, the gender dysphoria recedes with puberty. Instead, many of these adolescents will identify as non-heterosexual. So even in that case, the fact that they were able to explore that doesn't seem to be harmful and seems to be indicative of some sort of marker of some kind for potential non-heterosexuality. So that's an important piece of information. What I will say, however, is that children who are above the age of 12, those who are in adolescence, overwhelmingly, when they experience gender dysphoria, end up identifying long term with their with the gender they end up taking. So when you go through that dysphoria and you come to a position on gender after adolescence, and you find that within yourself and can identify it, that gender is usually the one that you carry on for the rest of your life. So yes, there is some fluidity in children still. And of course, there's fluidity without. I don't see a problem with that. And I'm sure people on the right will critique the fluidity aspect of it and all this stuff. But there's plenty of understandings that as we grow and develop, we are learning more about ourselves and we take on a stronger position when it comes to affirming ourselves and our identity, and as we see ourselves in any moment should be how people respect us. That is how I believe gender should function. Hey, Future Tara here. So, I wanted to make a clarification on that 80% statistic. It turns out that it's not accurate. The reason that I accepted it in the first place is that the courts actually took that in the prosecution that was done by this particular organization against the school district. Secondly, that particular study looked very scientific and very accurate to me. It turns out that it was not the most rigorous study in the world. So I actually found a pediatric journal that has stated, accordingly, research substantiates that children who are pre-pubertal and assert an identity of transgender know their gender as clearly and as consistently as their developmentally equivalent peers who identify as cisgender and benefit from the same level of social acceptance. I also found an article that talks about the type of research that's come up with this 80% statistic, and it said the methodology of those studies is very flawed because they didn't study gender identity, said Diane Ehrensaft, Director of Mental Health at UCSF's Child and Adolescent Gender Clinic. Those desisters were, a good majority of them, simply proto-gay boys whose parents were upset because they were boys wearing dresses. They were brought to the clinics because they weren't fitting gender norms. This article goes on to say, in addition, 38 of the 127 kids in one study were originally designated sub-threshold for gender identity disorder, meaning they did not fulfill all the criteria meeting the official diagnosis. So the studies were not accurately representing gender dysphoria. I just wanted to point that out and state, I guess I made a mistake. I think my position still stands, though, that especially we shouldn't be ignoring, first of all, those 20% that it could have been in that 80% study. And even if those 80% of students ended up in a place where they did end up exploring gender, I don't see that as harmful. And I don't see it as just a phase like a lot of conservatives would like to. I was not trying to appeal to that argument at all. And if it came across that way, I apologize. I do want to say that this understanding sits a lot better with how I've come to understand things. But again, the courts and that study looked to be a good amount of evidence. And if someone like me who really prioritizes facts and information can get something right like this wrong, it frightens me that a lot of people might also get this wrong, including courts, including scientific studies who don't understand what they're studying. So, with that said, I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.
By contrast, studies also show that affirming a young child's gender dysphoria can have the opposite result, reinforcing these feelings well into adulthood. And leaving parents out of the discussion makes matters even worse.
So I could not find any evidence or any sources, and they do not provide them, to make the claim that backing a child's gender identity is harmful in the long run or reinforces dysphoria throughout their lifetime. I can't speak to that because I don't have any evidence to it, and I think the burden of proof is on the people in this video to provide a source, and they haven't. So until I see a source that says otherwise, I am going to just assume that's absolute trash.
As one expert, clinical professor of psychiatry at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, Dr. Stephen B. Levine has put it, for a child to live radically different identities at home and at school, and to conceal what he or she perceives to be his or her true identity from parents, is psychologically unhealthy in itself and could readily lead to additional psychological problems.
So, let's explore that concept for a moment, because what I believe they're trying to say is that the school allowing for a different gender identity between school and home is what's causing the harm. However, if you look at the actual data that is provided from the Madison School District when in their gender support plan, which is actually a pretty comprehensive document that definitely is worth taking a look at, their policy on disclosure to families is as such. Students identified as transgender, non-binary, or gender expansive may have not come out to their families regarding their gender identity. Disclosing a student's personal information, such as gender identity or sexual orientation, can pose imminent safety risks, such as losing family support and housing. All staff, correspondence, and communication to families in regard to students shall reflect the name and gender documented in Infinite Campus, unless the student has specifically given permission to do otherwise. This might involve using the student's affirmed name and pronouns in the school setting and their legal name and pronouns with family. In the event that a student insists upon maintaining privacy from their family, student services staff shall discuss with the student contingency plans in the event that their privacy is compromised. Student service staff shall provide support and access to resources for transgender, non-binary, and gender expansive students and their families. The distinct LGBTQ+ lead is also available for consultation and support. On the surface, at the very least, that's all really comprehensive and amazing. And what that's actually speaking to is that it's actually the families at home that are the problem. It is not the school by affirming their identity that's the issue. If you want to speak to the psychological, impact of having to live a dual existence, the issue lies in the fact that the child cannot be themselves at home. It is the parents being transphobic and messed up that is allowing for their child to experience psychological trauma because they know that they can't trust their parents. That they are not unconditionally loved by the people who brought them into this world and are presumed to raise them. And if it's other guardians in their lives, not their parents, then I apply the same standards. Honestly, if you are a guardian of a child and you choose not to accept their identity and give them that love and, that unwavering love and support, then you are part of the problem. And you, honestly, I see it as abusing your kid.
Meaningful and healthy support of a child struggling with gender issues must include parents. It's obvious why the moral duty of any school, and certainly the legal duty of a public school, is to inform the parents of children who are struggling with gender dysphoria.
And if the parents are not abusive and the kid feels safe with their parents, they will. But if you're going to be religiously intolerant and you're going to use your position and religion at home as a tool to abuse your child or try to send them off to a pray away the gay camp, then that is not acceptable. We are not talking about a situation where these parents are just being, so nice and wonderful to their kids, and the kids are just trying to hide it for no reason. Kids know fear. Kids know what they have to fear and why they have to fear it. And chances are, some of these things were tried to be expressed to their parents, and the parents basically responded to silence the kid. And the kid learned to shut up about it. Or they heard enough stuff from their parents and the things that have come out of their mouth over the years talking to neighbors or relatives that puts them in the position where they feel unsafe and unheard. This is not acceptable. This is on the parents. And to twist all of this and manipulate it as if it's on the schools and on the children themselves is absolutely absurd and ridiculous.
And it should go without saying that parents should never be lied to about what is going on with their own children. But all this took a distant second place to Madison Public School District's stated goal: to disrupt the gender binary. In May...
So what I could find on that information is that probably is absolutely true, that some semblance of that phrasing was in their documentation, but it was in reference of affirming trans identities. And again, screw the gender binary. It's not real. Doesn't have a basis in scientific consensus anymore. Gender is a social construct. It is a spectrum. It is infinitely large on how you can present and perform gender in this world, right? Like your identity is from an infinite spectrum. That is the backing of science right now. So no, their perspective, that is this quote unquote biblical understanding, has nothing to do with the reality of things. And this should be in schools.
2019, one of the schools in the district held an assembly where kindergartners through fifth graders were made to watch a video of one of their teachers. In the video, the teacher read a book that says things like, "Are you a boy or a girl? How can you be both? Some days I am both. Some days I am neither. Most days I am everything in between." Then came the big reveal. The teacher, 6 and 7-year-olds were told, now identifies as the opposite sex.
Again, with the sex thing, sex has nothing to do with this. Sex and gender are completely distinct. Sex is a bimodal distribution of different characteristics. Gender is a spectrum. This is established science. That's the first issue. The second issue here is the teacher in question did not come out as the opposite sex or even the opposite gender. They came out as non-binary. One of the things they were attempting to explain to their students is that they were assigned male at birth, which again confuses me because they showed what would symbolically be the opposite of that. And I don't even feel like I should have had to explain that part of it, but it's just frustrating that they're the ones like just getting it all wrong. And this teacher came out as non-binary, and they preferred the usage of mix, MX, instead of Mr. or Mrs. If you're not familiar with that, mix is what you use instead of Mr. or Mrs. for someone who is non-binary, or miss, or any of those other usages, right? Some people tend to prefer just their last name being used if they're non-binary. Some people prefer mix being put in front of it. This particular person took mix, and their identity was to come out to their students as non-binary because they want to be addressed properly, and it's an educational moment. It's teaching about the lived experience of their teacher and kind of modeling that and presenting a safe space for students who want to explore gender. I don't see an issue with this. But, that's, the teacher somehow identifying as the opposite sex, and it's ruining everything, and the students are so confused. I guarantee you, most of the students in that classroom or that auditorium or whatever it was, walked out of there being like, oh, that's cool. Anyway. And it was the parents freaking out, because it's almost always the parents freaking out. The students just are happy to, make other people happy and just affirm them. They have to learn that crappy behavior when they become adults.
Under the school policy, disrupting the gender binary, also means leaving it up to teachers and minor children whether or not the parents deserve to be included in developing a gender support plan.
Do you think that minor students are not capable of establishing some sort of understanding outside of their parents or shouldn't thrive out of that situation? I mean, psychologically speaking, at some point in a child's life, they need to learn to establish boundaries between themselves and their parents. That is generally a good, healthy set of behavior. And I'm not a psychologist, like I can't, or a psychiatrist, I can't speak on the ins and outs of when a child should begin that development. But I am trusting on some level that if a child is feeling unsafe and decides to talk to their parents about, they can't talk to their parents about certain things and they decide to talk to their teacher, then maybe that's a good place to start developing some of those boundaries outside of the parents' scope of vision. And I'm not saying that everything should be completely disconnected from a parent, especially if the parents are good to their kids. What I'm saying is that the exploration of boundaries is probably a good thing to start at a young age. I mean, having social skills and development outside of the family structure and home is part of the benefits of public schools.
And to keep parents as in the dark as possible, the policy instructed teachers to file the plan in their own confidential records, not in student records, which parents have a legal right to see. In response to this abuse of power and dereliction of duty by the Madison Public School District,
Abuse of power and dereliction of duty. Such fierce words. I feel it's the parents who are abusing their power and having a dereliction of duty. They're shirking their responsibility here to take care of their kids properly and love them.
14 parents, with the help of Alliance Defending Freedom, together with lead counsel from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, sued the district, calling on the court to uphold the fundamental rights of parents that are under threat from the policy. In September 2020, the court temporarily blocked the school district from lying to or deceiving parents about the gender identity their child may have adopted at school. But the case...
It's so dishonest to call it lying in this particular case. It's protecting the kid. And the fact that the court had to put that up is ridiculous, honestly, and it speaks to the volume that I don't always think the courts have any understanding about the modern understandings of how gender or anything works. Science has come so far, and the courts just don't understand it. And they don't care. It has nothing to do with expertise anymore. It has nothing to do with speaking to truth and what's going on. It has everything to do with the fact that these conservative judges just want to purport their ideology first and then choose the ruling that goes with it later.
Case is far from over. Parents should be able to trust their children's teachers to uphold basic values and to affirm biological realities.
There we go. Basic values and biological realities. If you had any doubt that they were talking about the religiosity of, supposedly Christian gender roles and understandings, which, I'm sorry, the Bible is not exactly the place where I think we should be looking for from modern understandings of gender and sex and marriage and all these other things. This is the same type of argument they used against gay marriage. This is the same type of argument they'll constantly keep using moving forward with every sort of advanced understanding that we come to about the human experience and exploration of self. They want to pigeonhole people into these very defined roles that limit their freedoms and limit their understandings. And the more they can manipulate and control their children in this particular way, the better off they're going to feel. The more they can justify it through their belief in God, the more that they're going to harm children.
They shouldn't have to take legal action to establish those basic expectations. But today, apparently they do. Is something similar happening at a school district near you?
Okay, this is going to be the propaganda part. It's not really worth looking at. But one other thing I want to call attention to, because I've been making the claim this entire time that this is based on some sort of religious principle. So I want to speak to that. The actual court case, what they're looking for in terms of relief is, in the first clause of their relief, a declaration that the Madison School District's policy violates plaintiffs' fundamental rights as parents under both Article 1, Section 1 and Article 1, Section 18 of the Wisconsin Constitution, to the extent that it enables their child to change gender identity at school by selecting a new affirmed name and pronoun without parental consent, B, prohibits teachers and other staff from communicating with plaintiffs about their child's gender dysphoria, including any desired change in name and pronouns, without first obtaining the child's consent. And C, instructs or permits teachers and other staff to deceive parents by, among other things, using different names and pronouns around parents than in school. So I actually looked at the Wisconsin Constitution. Article 1, Section 1 has nothing to do with this. It just says that all people are born equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. By that logic, the child should be able to consent to, whether or not their parents hear this stuff. Just saying. There's not really much there that tells me that. But Article 1, Section 18, give me 1 second to find this. That's Section 9. Section 14, 17, 18. Freedom of worship, liberty of conscience, state religion, and public funds. The right of every person to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of conscience shall never be infringed. Nor shall any person be compelled to attend, erect, or support any place of worship or to maintain any ministry without consent. Nor shall any control of or interference with the rights of conscience be permitted, or any preference be given by law to any religious establishments or modes of worship. Nor shall any money be drawn from the treasury for the benefit of religious societies or religious or theological seminaries. Can you tell me what that has to do with a child having their preferred pronouns? Can you tell me what that has to do with any of the things that we mentioned in this particular video? It doesn't. This is just an attempt to control children and indoctrinate them with a certain religious understanding of themselves that prevents them from exploring their gender and from being the person they see themselves as, and asking that their family and the people around them affirm their identity. It is an attack on these children, and I believe that 1, this video should not be on YouTube. This should be pulled down. Secondly, I believe that these parents, in this particular case, are abusing their children by causing permanent psychological damage, making them feel unsafe to speak about their gender identity in the home. 3, I applaud this particular school district because I believe that this school district is doing a huge service to transgender and gender non-binary children, as well as any child who is experiencing any exploration of their sexual orientation or any other gender or sex-based position that they want to explore. They're making a safe space for these children, and they sound like they're doing a wonderful job of it. And I applaud them. Keep it going. I think more school districts need to be doing this kind of stuff. I wish that kind of stuff existed in my school growing up. With that said, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications. Feel free to follow me on Twitter and check out my brand new Discord in the description down below. And with that said, my name is Anarchist Tara, and I hope you enjoyed watching.